40 years of scrubbing hospital floors taught me exactly how to clean up dirty messes. But watching my only son stand at the altar, grinning in a custom tuxedo bought entirely with my stolen life savings, was the exact moment I decided to serve him a devastating plate of hard karma. My name is Bianca Washington. Most folks at the First Corinthian Baptist Church just call me Miss B. I'm 72 years old, and if you look at my hands, you'll see the map of a hard life drawn into the knuckles. For 4 decades, I worked as an orderly and then a licensed practical nurse at Mercy General. I worked double shifts, night shifts, and holiday shifts. When my husband, Arthur, was alive, he worked the line down at the Ford plant. We didn't take fancy vacations to Europe, and we didn't drive cars straight off the showroom floor. We built a life out of bricks, sweat, and a quiet, relentless kind of love. When Arthur passed away from pancreatic cancer 12 years ago, my world cracked open. But Arthur, bless his fiercely protective heart, left me with a paid-off mortgage on our 3-bedroom house here in Chicago and a decent life insurance policy. I took that money, combined it with my pension and the savings I had scraped together from skipping lunches and patching old winter coats, and I put it in a special high-yield savings account at the downtown branch of Liberty National. Exactly $142,500. That was my fortress. That money was my absolute guarantee that I would never be a burden to anyone in my old age. It meant that if my hips gave out, I could hire a nurse. If the roof caved in, I could fix it. It was my peace of mind, bundled up in a bank ledger. And then there was Darnell. Darnell is my only child. When the Lord only gives you one, you tend to pour every drop of water you have onto that single seed. Maybe Arthur and I spoiled him. We wanted him to have the soft life we never did. We paid for his degree at Northwestern in full. We bought him his first car, a sensible little Honda, so he wouldn't have to ride the bus in the snow. Darnell grew up to be a handsome, charming man, 32 years old, tall like his daddy, with a smile that could talk a dog off a meat truck. He worked in corporate marketing, making decent money. But Darnell always had a taste for champagne on a tap-water budget. He liked designer suits, imported watches, and being seen in the right places. I ignored the warning signs because a mother's love is often just a deliberate kind of blindness. 2 years ago, Darnell brought home a woman named Chloe Sterling. From the moment she stepped onto my front porch, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the November wind. Chloe was beautiful. I'll give her that. She had pale, flawless skin, hair the color of spun gold, and eyes like chipped ice. She wore a coat that cost more than my first automobile, and she looked at my cozy, well-kept home like it was a museum exhibit of peasant life. "Oh, Bianca," she said, refusing to call me Mrs. Washington. "This house is so quaint. It must be exhausting maintaining such an old property." Over the next year, Darnell fell completely under her spell. Chloe came from what she called quiet wealth in Connecticut. She dropped names of country clubs and boarding schools, and she had my boy bending over backward to prove he was worthy of her pedigree. He took out loans to buy her a 3-carat diamond ring. I bit my tongue so hard it bled, smiling through the engagement dinner while she complained about the vintage of the wine. Then came the wedding planning. Chloe didn't just want a wedding. She wanted a coronation. She booked the grand ballroom at the Astoria Hotel. She wanted a 10-piece orchestra, walls made of imported white roses, and a custom designer gown. Darnell came to my house one Sunday afternoon, looking pale and sweating through his polo shirt. "Ma," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "the wedding budget is getting a little out of hand." "Well, they have their money tied up in some European trusts right now, so they can't liquidate the funds for the wedding." I set my teacup down. "European trusts? Darnell, if her daddy is as rich as she claims, he can write a check for his daughter's wedding. That is the tradition." "It's complicated, Ma," Darnell pleaded, his eyes wide and desperate. "I need some help. just a loan. Maybe 50,000? I stared at my son. I saw the desperation, the weakness that I had inadvertently cultivated by never letting him fall. $50,000? Darnell Arthur Washington, have you lost your mind? That is my blood and bone in that bank account. That is for my old age. I will give you $10,000 as a gift to pay for your caterer or whatever you see fit. But I am not funding a royal gala just so Chloe can impress people who don't care about her. Darnell looked furious, then heartbroken. But eventually, he swallowed his pride and accepted the check for $10,000. He told me he would figure out the rest. He told me he loved me. I thought that was the end of it. I thought my son was finally learning how to stand on his own 2 feet and tell that girl no. I had never been more wrong in my entire life. 6 months passed. The wedding was just 4 weeks away, and the invitations had arrived. They were heavy, pressed in gold foil, smelling faintly of lavender. The event was shaping up to be the social event of the season. Darnell seemed stressed but triumphant. Chloe was glowing, boasting on social media about her ice sculptures and the celebrity chef she had flown in for the reception. I assumed Darnell had taken out another massive loan. I prayed for his financial soul, but I stayed out of it. In late April, Chicago got hit with a spring storm that tore through the south side like a freight train. A massive oak branch came crashing down onto my roof, punching a hole straight through the attic. The rain poured in, ruining the drywall in the spare bedroom. I called my contractor, a good man named Mr. Henderson, and he gave me a quote: $8,500 for an emergency roof repair and interior patching. I'll have a cashier's check for you by tomorrow afternoon, Mr. Henderson, I told him. Fetching my umbrella, I drove my Buick down to the Liberty National branch. The air inside the bank was cool, smelling of floor wax and old paper. I walked up to the counter, where my friend, Shirley Jenkins, was working. Shirley and I had known each other for 20 years. She used to sing alto in the church choir with me. Hey there, Bee. Shirley smiled warmly. Heard about the storm. You doing all right? Just a little roof damage. Praise the Lord, it wasn't worse, I said, sliding my ID and account booklet across the marble counter. I need a cashier's check for $8,500. Taken out of my primary savings, please. Shirley adjusted her reading glasses and started typing. I stood there, humming a hymn, thinking about what color paint I should use for the spare room. The typing stopped. I looked up. Shirley was staring at her computer screen. The warm, friendly smile had vanished from her face, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated horror. The color had drained from her dark skin, leaving her looking ashen. Shirley? I asked, my heart doing a strange, heavy flutter. Is the system down again? B. Shirley whispered, her voice trembling. She looked around nervously, then leaned over the counter. B. There must be a mistake. Let me get the branch manager. Panic is a cold thing. It doesn't rush you. It creeps up your spine and wraps its fingers around your throat. I stood frozen as Shirley hurried to the back office. A moment later, she returned with Mr. Gable, the branch manager. He ushered me into his glass-walled office and closed the blinds. Mrs. Washington, Mr. Gable said gently, folding his hands on his desk. You asked to withdraw $8,500 from your savings. Yes, the account ending in 4,000. 409, I said, my voice steady, though my hands had begun to shake. Mrs. Washington, the current available balance in that account is $412.16. The room spun. The hum of the air conditioner suddenly sounded like a roaring jet engine. That's impossible, I snapped, standing up. I have over $140,000 in that account. I haven't touched it since Arthur died. Mr. Gable turned his monitor around. Mrs. Washington, 3 months ago, there was a series of wire transfers, one for $50,000. another for 60,000, and a final one for 32,000. Who authorized that? I shouted, the decorum I had maintained my whole life shattering. I didn't sign for any wire transfers. Mr. Gable looked at me with a pity that made me sick to my stomach. You didn't, ma'am. Your son did. The floor dropped out from beneath me. I fell back into the leather chair, gasping for air as if I had been punched in the chest. Darnell? I choked out. He is listed as a joint owner on the account, Mrs. Washington. You added him 12 years ago, shortly after your husband passed away. Legally, he has full authorization to move funds without your signature. I remembered sitting in this very bank, blinded by grief, terrified that I might have a heart attack and leave my boy locked out of the money he would need to bury me. I had put his name on the account as a safeguard, a mother's ultimate act of trust. Where did the money go? I asked, my voice suddenly deadly quiet. Mr. Gable printed out the transaction history and slid it across the desk. I put on my reading glasses. My hands were shaking so violently I had to lay the paper flat on the desk to read it. The wires hadn't gone to Darnell's checking account. They hadn't gone to the Astoria Hotel or to a florist. All 3 wire transfers, totaling $142,000, had been sent to a domestic corporate account registered under the name Sterling Enterprises and Holdings, LLC. Sterling. Chloe's last name. Sterling. I didn't cry. The betrayal was too deep, too absolute for tears. It bypassed sorrow and went straight to a cold, calcified rage. I thanked Mr. Gable, took the printouts, and walked out of the bank. I sat in my Buick for an hour, watching the rain hit the windshield, clutching the papers that proved my only child had financially gutted me. When I finally drove home, I picked up the phone and called Darnell. Ma. Hey, he answered, sounding upbeat. I was just thinking about you. Chloe and I are tasting the cake today. Come to the house, Darnell. I interrupted, my voice flat. Right now. Ma, I can't right now. We have the baker. If you are not sitting at my kitchen table in 20 minutes, I said, I will call the police. I hung up. 18 minutes later, Darnell's car pulled into the driveway. He walked into the kitchen looking annoyed, but the moment he saw the bank statement spread out on the table, all the blood left his face. He looked exactly like he did when he was 7 years old, and I caught him stealing money from my purse. Ma, he stammered, backing up a step. $142,000. Darnell, I said, not yelling, not screaming, just staring him down. Every floor I scrubbed, every vacation I didn't take, every dime your father left me so I wouldn't die in poverty. You took it. Darnell broke. He fell to his knees right there on the linoleum, grabbing at my hands, tears streaming down his face. Ma, please, you gotta understand. Chloe's parents cut her off. They didn't have the money in trusts. Her dad went bankrupt. She was so ashamed, Ma. She told me if she didn't get the wedding she deserved, she'd cancel the whole thing. She'd leave me. I looked down at the man I had raised. He wasn't a man at all. He was a coward, terrified of losing a woman who only loved him for what he could buy her. So you stole from your mother, I said, pulling my hands away from his grasp as if his touch burned. You robbed a 72-year-old widow to pay for ice sculptures. I'm going to pay you back, Ma. I swear to God, I'm up for a promotion next year. I'll give you every dime back. He was sobbing now, a pathetic, wet sound. I just wired it to her family's LLC to pay the vendors directly so we could bypass the taxes. Please, Ma, don't call the cops. It'll ruin my life. It'll ruin the wedding. I looked at the bank statement again. Sterling Enterprises and Holdings, LLC. A sudden, sharp instinct pierced through my anger. I had been a nurse for 40 years. I knew how to look for symptoms. I knew how to read the signs of a disease hiding beneath the skin. Darnell said Chloe's dad went bankrupt. But if he went bankrupt, why did he have an active LLC receiving massive wire transfers? Why didn't Darnell just pay the vendors himself? Chloe wasn't just a spoiled, high-maintenance bride. She was something much, much worse. And my foolish son had handed her the keys to my entire life. "Get up," I told him, my voice turning to ice. He scrambled to his feet, wiping his face. "Ma." "No," I lied smoothly. "Because technically, your name is on the account. You didn't break the law, Darnell. You just broke my heart. Ma, I'm so sorry." "Save it," I snapped. "I want you to leave my house. I will figure out my roof, and I will see you at your wedding." Darnell looked relieved, utterly oblivious to the storm gathering behind my eyes. He thanked me, apologized a dozen more times, and practically ran out the door. I watched him drive away. Then, I picked up the phone book. I wasn't calling the police. I was calling a man I had treated years ago in the ER, a man named Thomas Wright, who happened to be one of the best private investigators in Chicago. If my money was gone, I was going to find out exactly where it went. And before this wedding was over, I was going to burn Chloe Sterling's gilded little world to the ground. Let me tell you something about secrets. They have a smell. They smell like burnt ozone right before a lightning strike. 2 days after I kicked Darnell out of my kitchen, I found myself sitting in a vinyl booth at a 2 4-hour diner off Cicero Avenue. The coffee tasted like copper and regret, but I wasn't there for the food. I was there for Thomas Wright. Thomas was a retired Chicago police detective who took up private investigation to pay for his grandkids' college tuition. I had patched up his shoulder in the ER back in '98 after a domestic dispute went sideways, and Thomas was the kind of man who kept his ledgers balanced. When I called in my favor, he didn't ask questions. He just asked for the LLC's name and 24 hours. The bell above the diner door jingled, and Thomas slid into the booth across from me. He was a broad-shouldered man with a salt and pepper mustache and eyes that had seen too much of the world's ugly side. He didn't say hello. He just dropped a thick manila folder onto the Formica table. "B," Thomas said, his voice a low rumble. "You always were a sharp woman. Your instincts are better than half the rookies I used to train." "Don't butter me up, Thomas," I said, folding my hands tightly in my lap to hide the tremor. "Just tell me what my idiot son bought with my life savings." Thomas sighed, tapping the folder. "The company, Sterling Enterprises and Holdings LLC, was registered in Delaware 8 months ago, but it's not a family trust. It's a shell corporation. And the name Chloe doesn't exist anywhere on the incorporation documents." I frowned. "What do you mean? She doesn't exist?" "I mean, the woman parading around in 3-carat diamonds isn't Chloe from Connecticut," Thomas said, pulling out an 8x10 photograph. He slid it across the table. It was a mugshot. The woman in the photo had dark, flat hair instead of spun gold, and she wasn't wearing an ounce of makeup, but those chipped ice eyes were unmistakable. "Meet Tabitha Montgomery," Thomas said. "Born and raised in Reno, Nevada. She doesn't have a wealthy daddy in Europe. Her father was a mechanic, and her mother passed away when she was young. Tabitha has a rap sheet in 3 different states for check fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. She targets mid-level corporate guys who make enough money to have decent credit, but are insecure enough to fall for the high society routine." I stared at the mugshot. The breath left my lungs in a slow, jagged exhale. My Darnell, my sweet, foolish, status-obsessed boy, had been marked by a professional grifter. "Where did my money go, Thomas?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Thomas flipped to the next page. "That's the kicker. Tabitha isn't just stealing to buy designer shoes. The 142 grand Darnell wired to that LLC? It sat there for exactly 4 hours before it was transferred out to 2 places. 30,000 went to a high-end criminal defense attorney down in Miami. And the rest? The rest was wired to an offshore account in the Bahamas known for washing money for illegal gambling syndicates," Thomas explained. "See, Tabitha has a husband. Legally, they're separated. but they run in the same circles. His name is Desmond. Desmond got caught up in a massive federal racketeering charge last year, and he owed some very bad people a lot. The rage that washed over me was so pure, so white-hot. It felt like a religious experience. Tabitha Montgomery was using the money Arthur and I had bled for the money meant for my twilight years to bail out a career criminal, and she was using my son's desperate need for validation to do it. "Does Darnell know?" I asked. "Not a clue," Thomas said. "She's playing him like a cheap fiddle. The wedding vendors? She's paying them just enough deposits to keep them on the hook, probably using maxed-out credit cards in Darnell's name. As soon as they say I do, she's going to clean out whatever he has left, file for divorce, and vanish into the wind." I closed the folder. The tremor in my hands was gone, replaced by something cold and immovable. "Bay," Thomas said softly. "You want me to take this to the police? We have enough for fraud charges." "No," I said, sliding the folder into my worn leather handbag. "B, listen to me. This woman is dangerous. If you confront her—" "I'm not going to confront her, Thomas," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I'm going to let her put on her white dress. I'm going to let her walk down that aisle. She wants a high society wedding? I'm going to give her a show nobody in this city will ever forget." The following Saturday was the bridal shower. It was hosted at the Oak Brook Country Club, a place where the chandeliers looked like they weighed more than my Buick. Tabitha, I refused to even think of her as Chloe anymore, had invited 50 of her closest friends, most of whom looked like they spent their weekends comparing Botox doctors. I arrived wearing my Sunday best, a tailored navy blue suit and my grandmother's pearl brooch. I walked into that sunlit room, radiating the sweet, harmless energy of an oblivious, elderly mother-in-law. Tabitha was holding court near a towering display of imported macarons. When she saw me, a flicker of genuine annoyance crossed her face, but she quickly masked it with a brilliant, camera-ready smile. "Bianca! You made it!" she cooed, gliding over and kissing the air next to my cheek. She smelled of expensive perfume and lies. "Darnell told me you had a bit of a roof emergency. I was so worried you wouldn't be able to celebrate with us." "The Lord provides." "My dear," I smiled, patting her arm. Her skin was cold. "I wouldn't miss this for the world. It's not every day a mother watches her son marry into such prestige." Tabitha beamed, eating up the compliment like a starving dog. "Well, we are just thrilled. My parents are so sorry they couldn't fly in for the shower. Daddy is tied up with the board in London." "Oh, what a shame," I replied, sipping my sparkling water. Over the next 2 hours, I played my part perfectly. I smiled at the snooty friends. I admired the ridiculous gifts, crystal champagne flutes, silk bedsheets, espresso machines that cost more than a month's rent. But my eyes were working the room. I was watching Tabitha. I watched how she casually avoided answering direct questions about her childhood. I watched how she checked her phone every 10 minutes, a hard, nervous edge to her jawline. About an hour into the shower, a woman walked in late. She was older, dressed in a sharp Chanel suit, dripping in diamonds. Tabitha practically sprinted across the room to greet her, introducing her loudly as her Aunt Patricia from the Hamptons. Thomas had warned me about Patricia. According to Thomas's file, Tabitha had hired local theatre actors to play her extended family for the wedding events. They were getting paid premium rates to drink free champagne and lie through their teeth. I waited until Aunt Patricia excused herself to the powder room. I followed her, pushing open the heavy mahogany door just as she was touching up her lipstick in the mirror. "Lovely shower, isn't it?" I said casually, moving to the sink next to hers to wash my hands. "Oh, simply divine," Patricia said with a practiced upper-crust accent. "Chloe always did have impeccable taste." "Yes," I said, pulling a paper towel from the dispenser. "Tabitha is very resourceful." Patricia's hand slipped. A streak of crimson lipstick smeared across her cheek. She froze, staring at my reflection in the mirror. "I'm sorry, who?" Patricia stammered, her accent dropping slightly. I turned to face her, dropping the sweet old lady act entirely. Let's skip the theatre, ma'am. I know Tabitha Montgomery hired you from the Apex Talent Agency downtown. I know you're getting $300 an hour to play Aunt Patricia, and I know you don't live in the Hamptons. You live in a duplex in Naperville. The woman looked like she was about to faint. Look, lady. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen, opening the voice recorder app. I am Bianca Washington. The groom is my son. Tabitha paid your agency using stolen money, which means, as of right now, you are an accessory to grand larceny and federal wire fraud. My private investigator is ready to hand your headshot over to the Chicago PD. The color drained from her face. Wire fraud? She told me this was just a harmless gig. She said her real family was estranged and she just wanted some supportive faces for the photos. She lied, I said softly. Now, you have a choice. You can walk out of here and wait for the police to knock on your door in Naperville. Or you can tell me exactly what she told you to do for the wedding day, the actress crumbled. Over the next 10 minutes, with my phone recording every word, she spilled the entire operation. Tabitha had hired 6 actors in total, including the parents. The plan was for the actors to slip out the back door immediately after the cake cutting, before anyone could ask too many questions. Tabitha herself had a flight booked out of O'Hare for 6 a.m. the morning after the wedding, heading to Miami. Alone. Thank you, I said, stopping the recording. If I were you, I'd take off that Chanel suit, go home, and find a new line of work. I left her shaking in the bathroom and walked back out to the party. Tabitha was laughing, holding up a silver serving tray, surrounded by a crowd of adoring women. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt a cold, sharp clarity. She had taken my past. She was ruining my son's present, and she planned to steal his future. But Tabitha had made one fatal miscalculation. She assumed that because I was old, because I was quiet, and because I lived in a small house, I was weak. She was about to find out that a mother fighting for her son's survival is the most dangerous force on God's green earth. I gathered my purse, walked up to Tabitha, and gave her one last, grandmotherly hug. I can't wait for the wedding, dear, I whispered in her ear. It's going to be a day we will remember for the rest of our lives. The Astoria Hotel ballroom was a monument to stolen money. It was a sweltering Saturday in June. But inside, 400 guests shivered beneath crystal chandeliers, surrounded by thousands of imported white roses. I sat at the head table in a tailored emerald green dress, sipping ice water, watching the grand illusion my son had financed with my life's blood. Jamal sat beside me in his custom tuxedo, but his strained, hollow eyes betrayed him. He was drowning in debt, smiling through the panic. Beside him sat the architect of his ruin, Penelope Kensington, or rather, Roxanne Carmichael. Radiant in silk, she played the wealthy heiress flawlessly, tossing her head back in practiced laughter. At table 4, the hired actors playing Penelope's family picked nervously at their filet mignon. They wouldn't meet my gaze. They knew a storm was coming. During the toasts, the best man fumbled a speech before Penelope's fake father, a rented actor, delivered a tearful, fabricated tribute to his little girl. I sat perfectly still, letting them build their house of cards. The master of ceremonies took the microphone. We have a special treat. The mother of the groom, Mrs. Ruby Jackson, has prepared a presentation. I stood. The room quieted. Jamal looked startled. He hadn't approved a speech. Penelope's smile tightened with sudden anxiety. I walked to the microphone. 400 faces turned to me. I looked at Jamal. I loved him fiercely, but love without boundaries is just another form of destruction. I had to let him burn his house down so he could learn to build a real one. Good evening, I began, my voice steady across the cavernous room. When you raise a child, you sacrifice so they can stand tall and true. My late husband and I gave Jamal everything. We built a wall around him to keep the hardships of the world at bay. I paused. Jamal's eyes shone with unshed tears. He thought I was offering forgiveness. But, I continued, my tone dropping into something sharp, when you make a child's life too soft, they lose the ability to spot predators. They invite wolves right to the dinner table. So long as the wolf wears a designer gown, a low murmur rippled through the crowd. Penelope gripped the edge of the table. I pulled a black USB drive from my clutch and handed it to the audiovisual technician. Play it. The massive projector screen lowered. The ballroom lights dimmed. The first image wasn't a baby picture. It was a harsh police mugshot. The woman had dark, flat hair, no makeup, and a Reno police placard. It was Penelope, stripped of glamour. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. "Jamal," I said, my voice amplifying, "meet your bride. Her real name is Roxanne Carmichael. She is not a wealthy heiress. She is a career grifter with a rap sheet spanning a decade of identity theft, check fraud, and grand larceny." "Ma, what are you doing?" Jamal shouted, surging to his feet. "It's a fake!" Roxanne shrieked, her aristocratic veneer shattering. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "She manufactured this because she hates me." "Next slide," I said. The screen clicked to my bank statements, magnified for all. The dates and staggering wire transfers were clear. $142,000 drained from my life savings into Kensington Enterprises and Holdings LLC. "My son stole my life savings to pay for this spectacle," I announced. He bypassed my authorization and wired the money to a shell company he believed belonged to his bride's family. The screen clicked again. A new photo appeared. A hardened man in an orange prison jumpsuit. "That is Desmond Carmichael, Roxanne's legal husband, currently incarcerated for federal racketeering." The money my son stole didn't just buy white roses. It was wired from Roxanne's LLC to a Miami defense attorney, with the remainder funneled to an offshore Bahamian account to pay Desmond's syndicate debts. Chaos erupted. Guests gasped and stood up, pulling out phones. At table 4, the illusion broke. The actress playing the aunt bolted for the emergency exit. The fake father was right behind her, stripping off his rented tuxedo jacket. "Look at her family running, Jamal," I said softly, pointing at the fleeing actors. "They are hired theatre professionals from the Apex Talent Agency." Jamal looked physically struck. He stared at the empty chairs, the mugshot on the screen, and then slowly turned to Roxanne. "Penelope!" he choked out, utterly broken. "Tell me this is a lie." Roxanne didn't look at him. Survival instinct took over. She grabbed her heavy silk skirt, kicked off her white heels, and sprinted for the kitchen service doors. She didn't make it. Before she could reach the doors, they swung inward. Standing there, blocking her escape, was my investigator, Calvin, flanked by 2 plainclothes Chicago police detectives. "Roxanne Carmichael," the lead detective said, holding up steel handcuffs that caught the chandelier light. "We have a fugitive warrant out of Nevada for parole violation, and the FBI wants a word regarding interstate wire fraud." Roxanne fought like a cornered animal. It took both detectives to secure her wrists. As they dragged her out, her expensive crystal tiara slipped off, shattering on the floor. The ballroom was in ruins. The wedding planner hyperventilated near the melted ice sculpture. Guests flooded the exits. Jamal collapsed back into his chair, dropping his head into his hands, his shoulders shaking with violent sobs. The reality of his absolute ruin had crushed him. I walked over to the head table, picked up a broken piece of the tiara, and tossed it into a half-empty champagne bucket. I placed my hand firmly on my son's shaking shoulder. He flinched, but didn't pull away. "You chose to live in a fantasy, Jamal," I said quietly. "But reality always comes to collect its debt. Now, stand up like a man, apologize to whoever is left, and send them home." The aftermath was a brutal path of hard karma. Because Calvin was exceptional, he had tipped off federal authorities just in time. The FBI froze the offshore transfers before they fully cleared into the syndicate's accounts. It took 8 agonizing months of legal warfare, but I recovered $110,000. The remaining $32,000 had already been spent by Roxanne's Miami attorney, completely unrecoverable. Jamal did not escape the consequences. Legally liable, he broke the lease on his luxury apartment, sold his car, and liquidated his watches. He took a grueling second job, working overnight shifts at a warehouse. Every Friday, without fail, Jamal sits at my kitchen table and writes me a check for $400 to repay the debt. We are slowly, painfully rebuilding our relationship. It is a fragile thing, built on transparency rather than blind devotion. He is a deeply humbled man. The arrogant, status-obsessed boy I knew is gone, replaced by someone cautious, weary, and grounded in harsh reality. The federal prosecutors were merciless with Roxanne. They folded my case into her extensive list of charges. She was sentenced to 9 years in a federal penitentiary. The wealthy lifestyle she had violently stolen was permanently traded for a concrete cell. I still live in my quiet, sturdy house on the south side. My roof is repaired, my bank account is secure, and my conscience is clear. I scrubbed floors for 40 years, and if that taught me anything, it's this. You cannot build a golden life on a rotten foundation of lies. Eventually, the floor will cave in, and when it does, you have to be strong enough to survive the fall.